Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Fantasy Football Toolkit brought to you by the 360 Sports Network. And what a crazy fantasy football week we have had. So we bring back yet again our roundtable discussion to take a look at everything that's happened in the world of fantasy football and try to help cause some enlightenment and figure out what is going on. So with me, the value man James Dotson, I have Greg the Mad Scientist Bashero, Jordan the Goat Tanner, and Alex the Saint DeLaverson. Gentlemen, welcome back, and glad to get these roundtable discussions going again. How's it going, Greg?
Oh, going much better this week than compared to last week at this time. Nothing like riding the ship a little bit.
Oh, I agree with that. We finally got out of the 0-4 column, and I got to take down Alex in the process. Alex, what's going on, kid?
Not one of my better evenings. Playing you in 3 leagues. That never happens, and I lost 2 out of 3 of them. But I did beat you in your home fantasy draft, so that's a little consolation prize, I suppose. But last weekend in general was a very frustrating week for my fantasy football squads.
Yeah, and Jordan, I know you weren't exactly thrilled with how the week went on your end, though, either, did you?
Yeah, so certainly I'm glad to be back. I missed last week, but I heard the cast and you guys did an excellent job. Some of the daily fantasy picks haven't panned out the last 2 weeks. Kind of going back to the drawing board here this week, running a few different algorithms and projections, trying to find more of the higher ceilings with a lower floor, just to avoid just absolute busts like Hankerson and Daniels of last week, and then obviously the Charles injury didn't help at all. But from a league standpoint, certainly starting to see my teams come to their own. I believe all but one team that I didn't even have the control of my draft is sitting very poised for success right now. So I'm ready to make some moves and continue with the season.
Absolutely, and you kind of said it right there, little victories. Even when things don't seem to go right, it's about finding those little mini victories, and you said it there. It's been a really weird couple of weeks. We were talking before we went on the air here, how the top four of the top 5 quarterbacks, 4 out of the top 5 wide receivers are guys who are quite likely on the waiver wire in most standard fantasy leagues. Greg, I think you've got the best analysis with this. You talked about it in your quick toolkit post that went on this morning. Talk to us a little bit about that handicapping and what you mean by that and how you're looking at a horse terminology in terms of fantasy football.
Well, when you fantasy football and horse racing, it's all basically a modified form of betting itself. And basically what you're looking at in a horse race, you want to basically handicap a horse. You want to basically take a look and see, what are the horse's strengths, what are the horse's weaknesses, what is the field that horse is running against, to determine how you're going to place your bet on that particular horse. It's similar to what we're looking at here in fantasy football as well. And I know last week was a tough week. A lot of experts picks all around the board. And you look at other sites out there too. Nobody could foresee the upsets, and I call them upsets in the fantasy football realm, because there are players that just came out of obscurity, but were they really obscure? That's the question. Now, you take a look at somebody like a Josh McCown. Yeah, okay, I'm patting myself on the back. I picked him up. Yes. Why did I pick this guy up? Because, first of all, when I juxtapose him against my field of quarterbacks, for the past several weeks, he'd been throwing for 300-plus yards. The guy has been consistent. And one of the things that you're looking at when you're handicapping a fantasy football player is consistency in points, or consistency in being inconsistent, if you want to go on the flip side of things. Somebody like a Matt Stafford, consistently inconsistent. Anybody that is on the Detroit Lions team, consistently inconsistent, I think you should rid them off of your roster. On the same token,
Yeah, I wouldn't call the Lions consistently inconsistent right now. I'd call them consistently bad at this point. And
right. Well,
uh,
consistently consistent is consistently bad, as far as I'm
well,
concerned.
that
But
is,
you take a look at Josh McCown right now. He's pretty darn consistent. Now this is going to be a real interesting game against the Broncos because this is a top-ranked defense. If this guy can pull 250 yards or higher against one of those top-rated defenses in the NFL, yeah, this guy's a keeper and this guy's a true gem, and he should be a starter all around the board, no doubt about it. But on the same token, you might want to look at playing a better matchup where you have somebody like a Teddy Bridgewater against the Kansas City Chiefs defense. That might be a better matchup than having McCown going against the Denver Broncos defense that basically has saved Peyton Manning's behind, so to speak.
yeah, definitely. And another quarterback that we talked about before the show, Blake Bortles, had a rough week 1, but since then he's putting up over 20, 22 points week in, week out, consistency and throwing the ball a lot. Same way, Allen Hurns is still out there in a lot of leagues. How can he still be available? He's practically he would be leading the NFL in targets if it weren't for a guy by the name of DeAndre Hopkins. So that's something to look at. And I like what you're saying. It's about what have you done lately. It's looking at the matchups, but sometimes matchups look to be deceiving. Look at Owen Daniels, a great tight end in a great system, playing against a Raiders defense who couldn't do anything against tight ends this year, and Owen Daniels goes without a catch. However, while we might think that's a terrible bad thing, Jordan, you say that's really not a bad pick, even though he got a goose egg.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that when you look at the matchups, when you look at the numbers, you got to look even in a bigger picture. So Owen Daniels, you got the entire crowd that responds with, well, why did I pick him up, or why did I play him this week? Well, on average, the tight ends are almost guaranteed a touchdown against Oakland in the past 4 weeks. And on top of that, they are eclipsing, sometimes multiple touchdowns and over 60-plus yards receiving. Now, he was third on the team in targets behind Demaryius and Emmanuel Sanders, and he had 3 red zone targets. And for a tight end going against the Raiders defense, which is worst in the league against tight ends, to have 3 red zone targets and be third on the team in targets, knowing the star potential in Sanders and Demaryius, the potential was there. Obviously, had you have swung, towards Gates or Barnidge, I was really high on Gates. Barnidge, he's kind of been floating under the radar. I think that, the Ravens game was more of a tribute to him as far as, possibly being a tight end 1 for the rest of the season, just given how shaky that entire category has been. Travis Kelce's not getting enough targets. Jimmy Graham looks out of place in that offense. And outside of Gronk and maybe Greg Olsen, there's not really been a tight end that, even Martellus Bennett with Alshon and Eddie Royal out, saw 10-plus targets, but he managed to do nothing with it. So, in the big scheme of things, tight end being a position that Gronk seems to have a stranglehold on, Barnidge is certainly somebody that's starting to, become a name in the fantasy world and actually helped me win in a few leagues last week.
Yeah, definitely, and I think tight end, obviously beyond the top guys of honestly the only top guy in Gronkowski, you're going to be inconsistent at tight end, just whether or not a team chooses to take the tight end out of the game. Even look at Tyler Eifert, had a huge week last week with 2 touchdowns. Go back 3 weeks where he went without a catch, and again another goose egg. It looks bad, but if you watch the game, he should have had a touchdown catch, but was called back on the secret Calvin Johnson Dez Bryant rule. So. There's all sorts of variables going out there. Alex, what's your take after this entire week of chaos? What are you taking away from everything?
Well, I think the one thing I take away from everything is that the only thing that seems for sure is nothing's for sure. Now, I think Jordan basically hit the nail on the head. When you have matchups that are in favor of like the way Owen Daniels was projected to put up some decent points against the Raiders, you have to start him. I mean, things happen. Sometimes, the stars align for you and you can't capitalize. Most of the time, you do capitalize. So, people can make predictions and projections all you want, but especially like in standard leagues, I guess if your team, you just got to go with consistency. I trust Owen Daniels moving forward to still be a great tight end. I still would have him on my team, and this is me saying that, and I had him in a majority of my leagues, so I was very frustrated when he put up a goose egg, but you know what? That happens. So I still am going to go by matchups, basically with everything. I mean, I'm starting to break my own rule when it comes to Jaguar players. Our first few podcasts, one of my rule was to stay away from anyone on Jacksonville, but look at Bortles and Hearns. So you just got to go with the trend. So if I'm taking away anything, is go with the trend. Go with what's consistent. And it can be kind of frustrating, but even if the majority of your players this week expect that line on the line graph to continue to go up. So I wouldn't throw in the towel yet, or I wouldn't rush to any judgments like dropping an Owen Daniels or anything along those lines. Stick with your guns.
Yeah, and I think the big thing right there, you kind of alluded to it. Trends change. I mean, there's no trend that always is the same thing from one week to the next, 1 year to the next, 1 decade to the next. You never know what exactly to expect, but the thing is you need to adapt with those trends and adapt in your thinking with it. And, I mean, I think we've all kind of said it right there. We've all adjusted at least a little bit over the past couple weeks in what our thought processes are when making our selections each week. I mean, I definitely like looking at the matchups, but I'm looking more at figuring out and seeing just based on what you have done. I don't care who you played. I don't care who you are playing. I'm going to say that first big week, okay, I may have to dismiss it as a fluke. Once you have that second big week in a row, okay, that's no fluke. Now I'm jumping on board big time. And guess what? It could pay big dividends, like, for example, Devontae Freeman. Okay, he had 2 big weeks. He followed it up with an even bigger third week in a row. Barnage, same thing. Couple big weeks in a row, we're jumping on board. Look at a guy like Rashad Matthews, who started the year with 3 big games and then had like 2 catches in his 4th game. So it works both ways. Sometimes it's going to get you a big win, and sometimes you're going to have some trouble.
Right. It's just the nature of fantasy football. It really is.
It really is. And all it ends up being is that you still have to keep scouring that waiver wire and see what players there are to pick up. And there's plenty. Like I said, Allen Hurns is still out there. We got a couple of really interesting running back news coming out here in the past few hours. First things first, we've been on it since week 1 about Christine Michael going to Dallas. Jordan got mad at me 2 weeks ago when I tweeted something out about him going to getting first-team reps a couple weeks ago with the Cowboys. Now it sounds like when they come out of the bye week, not only will Matt Castle be quarterbacking, but Christine Michael will be the starting running back. What does that mean, Jordan? Are you going and picking him up right now?
So I've been harboring this young fellow on my team since week 2 in every single league, and this is music to my ears. I've been waiting for him to be given the opportunity. I saw him get 1 carry against, I believe it was Atlanta, for -2 yards, and then he followed up the following week with 1 carry for 6 yards. He deserves the opportunity. Not that Randall isn't performing. He's not performing terribly by any means, but I think that with the issues he's had at the goal line by reaching out, kind of, more or less showboating the coaching staff, and McFadden having taken over the passing downs from Dunbar, I think that they're just exploring all options. I don't think that you make a trade for a guy that you don't plan on using. I think that his athletic ability and his run style works better for the Dallas offensive line. So I've been on board with him. I'm happy to hear this news, and I'm definitely am looking forward to them coming out of the bye week.
Yeah, and I think you just kind of said something right there. McFadden definitely worth possibly picking up as a PPR person. Same with Theo Riddick. Greg, let me ask you this: what do you think of Ahmad Bradshaw returning to the Colts and supposedly pretty quickly here could be splitting carries with Frank Gore?
Yeah, that's going to be significant as well. Obviously, they see something in Bradshaw that Gore's not producing. That's something you want to keep an eye on. And that's actually a player that if you've got somebody who's not really cutting it on your bench, you may want to just drop that person and just kind of snag Bradshaw up as somebody to keep an eye on for a game or two to actually see what's going on. Another very intriguing player that I have really been taken by, actually there's two players I've been really taken by. One is Shane Vereen. Shane Vereen, his numbers have been trending very positively. And if you ever need help with on a running back situation, Vereen is somebody that you really should strongly consider if you haven't picked him up. And another guy that I'm really kind of intrigued with right now, considering that Odell Beckham is having some woes at this particular time frame, is Ruben Randall.
Yeah, Ruben Randall looks really good out there in New York, and a lot of people I think took flyers on him with Victor Cruz, and now with Cruz not coming back, if he still happens to be on your waiver wire, he needs to get off of it right straight away, no doubt about it. A couple other running backs who are really starting to come up. Duke Johnson, we've kept our eye on. Sounds like every week he's getting more and more into the offense, so he's somebody, again, if you have the availability. We're not saying go and sell your team to go and pick these guys up, but if you have guys who are available, and here's the thing too, yes, Kristen Michael is on bye this week, but you need to start stashing away players right now, because when you get in 2 or 3 weeks, when you have 6 teams on bye all in 1 week, you're going to be fighting to find anybody worth anything, worth breadcrumbs on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and I mean, don't sell yourself short if you didn't get the West or the Davis from the Charles injury. I think from a PPR standpoint, Bradshaw is going to be great in the Colts offense. He's familiar with it. There's already chemistry there. I think he finished as a top 15 running back when he was with them. Gore starting to pick it up a little bit. I've seen over the last 2 games or so. Hopefully he gets that fumble issue down. So I definitely like, at least stashing Bradshaw. Look for that more in a 12 or 14 man. 10, I think there's enough talent out there to where you could probably avoid that. But also Buck Allen, just because Taliaferro was put on the IR. Forsett was dealing with that ankle sprain, didn't practice today. And although it wasn't a high ankle sprain, similar to a hamstring, those things can't be taken lightly. And, although Buck Allen's not anybody that's going to set the world on fire, if you need a filler, you've got Latavius Murray on a bye week this week. You've got Randall or McFadden on a bye week. That might be somebody, or if you're a Forsett owner that you want to just put and make sure you're not in a position where you're having to fight the rest of the league, similar to that of a Charles owners for the Chandrick West, who, prior to the injury was announced as the secondary back. So if you didn't get him, make sure that you're looking at the depth chart. Make sure you're following the beat writers on Twitter. Those are going to be the guys that get you the information firsthand. You can read as many Yahoo articles as you want, and you can talk to as many friends as you want, but the beat writer is there. He's reporting from the facilities, and he's going to get you up-to-date information well before the rest of your league.
Definitely, and we did mention, I'm not a big fan of either Kansas City back right now. I didn't go after him on the waiver wire. Alex, let me ask you, if you had the choice, I mean, Niall Davis has done it in the past, but yeah, it's been Tre'Garrett West who's done everything and is appearing to be the number 2 right now. Is that who you're going after first between those two? If you have the waiver wire priority, is that who you're going after first?
Honestly, depends what league I'm in. I think Jordan said it. If you're in a PPR league, then, yeah, pick them up. I think, though, this is also a time where you might, to start looking at trades from a Jamal Charles owner in your league. Someone obviously has him. And if you pick one or two of those guys up, those also would be a time to think about shipping them too, because maybe they don't pan out. So maybe you want to consider, seeing what their value is right away. I know I'm not alone in thinking that. Michael Fabiano from NFL.com was alluding to that too. And the more I thought about it, the more I agreed with it, especially with how inconsistent things have been so far. So am I picking one of them up? It depends who I have on my roster, honestly. And when the leagues I'm in now, I don't know if I want to drop someone off my roster and pick, one of those two backs up, and considering the uncertainty with it. And then another thing I actually wanted to talk about, some players that had big weeks. But are they going to continue to have big weeks? I just want to know what you guys think. Is this just like a 1 week thing? How about Doug Martin from Tampa Bay putting up 34 points in most leagues? And obviously Antonio Gates had a big week.
Well,
Are these guys that are going to continue to produce, or is this just like kind of a 1 week thing?
Well, and that's the thing. The first week, you have to, take it with a grain of salt and see if they can duplicate it. Now, obviously, in the past, both Martin and Gates have done just that. They've put up big weeks. Heck, I remember how many years ago was it where I traded away Doug Martin, and that happened to be the week where he scored like 25 touchdowns in one game. My buddies never let me live that one down. That's my worst fantasy moment ever. But in all seriousness, they've done it before. But also, again, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Look at who they were playing, especially Martin playing against Jacksonville. Of course they're going to have a few more points than normal. So, I mean, that's just part of it right there. And you also have to look at, okay, with San Diego, they also got Ladarius Green, who has also been really good at the tight end position. Could they both do well and turn into a new, Gronk and Hernandez thing? Yeah, it's possible. But at the same time, you got to think of that. He's been gone for 4 weeks. Of course, he's going to want to come out big. Look at what Andre Johnson did. Pretty much nothing in the first 4 weeks. Then he goes and plays his old team, comes out with 2 touchdown performances. And Jordan, I know you wanted to talk about that as well. The playing your old team. I don't know. What's your thought on that? Is it really that much of an extra motivation? Do you look at that as a fantasy owner?
So, revenge games. They are probably the one variable you can't throw into any equation. Because you saw it with Steve Smith last year when he was traded from Carolina, or when he went to the Ravens, and absolutely exploded on Carolina. Andre Johnson doing the same against Houston. Do I trust San Francisco enough to have Bolden or Torrey Smith become the electric player and put up multiple touchdowns against the Ravens secondary, which looks suspect? I might take a flyer on it. I might put it in a few daily leagues, maybe for GPP standpoint. I'm not going to do it in a cash game. I don't trust him enough to do that. I don't trust Kaepernick enough to do it. So certainly I would take a flyer on that end. Cecil Shorts going to Houston. He's not really one of those primetime players that really holds enough on my end. DeAndre Hopkins, could break the record for most targets in a season, and he's just there's really nobody else on that team outside of Foster, Hopkins, and then I guess you could say Cecil Shorts that really is going to be an impact player. So again, take a flyer on him. I don't see Cecil having the same type of attitude as Steve Smith, but I could see Torrey Smith doing something. But the one thing that you had mentioned earlier about Doug Martin, I did want to touch base real quick. So past 2 games, he's rushed for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against New Orleans, he had about 80. Anytime they are in a game where he's getting 20 attempts or more, he's averaging over 80 yards or more. Now, they're going to be running into a bye week and then follow that with what I think to be a very improved and very strong Washington defense. But then I think from there, he might run into some matchups when he starts going against Philly, Indy, Dallas, and New Orleans later on, that he might be a worthy start week after week. And, you know, Chris or Charles Sims, yeah, he's a good passing down back, good from a PPR standpoint, but I definitely think that just with the landmines and the inconsistencies, like we had mentioned, with the running back position this year, that Doug Martin is somebody that I'm starting to fall more in love with. Yeldon, you could even say Yeldon the same. You've got somebody like C.J. Anderson, who has basically cemented himself on the bench, other than this week, with a prime matchup against Cleveland. If he does not excel this week, he's droppable in my eyes. He's worth nothing to me.
No, definitely right there, and it is. It's about, you know, what are you seeing? What are they doing? I like what you're seeing there with Martin, and, you know, matchups are going to happen, but you also have to talk about trusting your quarterback. And do I trust Winston? No, not really. Do I trust Kaepernick, like you said? No, not really. Here's somebody though who I think I was gonna say. Go ahead, Alex. Talk about it.
Trust. You know, last week there was one player we actually talked a lot about, and if he was gonna break out or not. You guys remember who it was? And it turned out he had a pretty decent game. I'm talking about oh God, what's his name? The running back from the Eagles.
Oh, DeMarco.
DeMarco Murray. Talk about DeMarco Murray. 80 yards, a touchdown, 37 reception yards. You know, we were talking about, you know, eventually he's going to have to break out. And, you know, I don't know if I would say those are breakout numbers, but, I mean, look, that's, you know, finally he's showing, you know, flashes of his former self. So is this something that, you know, it's like, hey, you know, finally, you know, he's back. It was just kind of a rough start to the season, or is that just going to be another thing there where he still hasn't earned your trust yet? To me,
No, I'm going to jump in and say he has not earned my trust at all.
Nope.
Only because it's not just him; it's his offense that he's playing in, and Chip Kelly, who was supposedly, you know, was going to have this flying circus offense, has been nothing but lackluster and pedestrian. And there's even rumors about Chip Kelly being the next head coach at USC. So when you have those rumors swirling at this particular time frame on a Philadelphia team that has not been able to generate much offense after a vaunted preseason where everybody was saying, boy, you know, he's got, you know, a loaded backfield, and no. As long as Chip Kelly is coaching the Eagles, and as long as they're struggling and it's a complicated offense, no, I don't see much hope in DeMarco Murray at this particular time.
Well, and Greg, you have to learn as a fantasy owner. You have to learn based on what's going on and become a better owner. Same thing as a coach, and he's not doing that, because in the games where he actually slows it down and they run a play every like 28 seconds or more, they're like 15-1. Anytime that they're running plays in on average less than 25 seconds, they are like 4-15 under his tutelage. Or I mean, those numbers off the top of my head, I forget the exact ones, but it's a night and day difference when they slow down and don't try to rush it, and they can actually control the ball for a little bit. that's when they're successful. But yet he still goes to his, snap it every 5 seconds because we have to. And I just don't get how a coach first can do that, but then second of all, in terms of fantasy, you can't trust that, and you have to go with players you trust and coaches you trust, and I can't trust a guy who is only going to give me a fantasy player on the field for 15 minutes in a game.
I would say at best, Murray is an emergency flex option. That would probably
I would
mark
agree.
Murray in a nutshell. Same thing with Darren Sproles, too. He had a week or two where he produced for me, and now it's just, nothing's happening with him. And I feel like, he obviously still has talent. Especially in the return game, he scores his touchdowns. But again, a lot of leagues, they put those touchdowns he scores into the defense category. So I don't know. And Sproles, same thing. If you're desperate for a flex option, put him into. But other than that, I think with any Eagles player outside Sam Bradford, there's no one I'm really screaming at to have on my team.
But you know what, Alex, I think a better flex option, if you could find that person, would be a Shane Vereen versus a Darren Sproles, to be honest.
Oh, definitely. Oh, Sproles is done in my mind. Unless you're getting points for return yards or return touchdowns, he has no place on your team, especially now that the Eagles are realizing what Ryan Matthews can do out of the backfield catching balls. That's where they thought they were going to still need Sproles, but Matthews has filled that role very well. He's gotten more receptions and more targets each of the last 2 weeks than Darren Sproles. Sproles has no place on my team right now.
I agree. Now, there's talk about the re-emergence of Pierre Thomas. Especially, they're looking at Pierre Thomas out in Kansas City. I don't know if they've actually pulled the trigger and basically signed this guy. But, with Jamal Charles being out with season-ending injury, any role that Pierre Thomas would take on out there would be a decent flex option role as well.
Yeah, see where he lands. That's not a bad idea at all, and we'll be keeping our ears open for that. I mean, like we said, already Ahmad Bradshaw getting signed. It's that time of year. I mean, running backs are dropping like flies, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, Jordan. I think it was you who said it about maybe making a trade with somebody who had the Jamal Charles type of thing, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking to maybe somebody who's panicking that has, say, maybe Eddie Lacy. Maybe I'm going to try to trade them a James Starks, that way that they can get a handcuff because they might be panicking right now. Kind of work your magic a little bit. But the one guy I want to talk about that I don't know how we've met. Oh, go ahead, Alex. Before we move on, go ahead and elaborate.
Well, I was going to say, that was actually me who said that, but the point remains. I have Rob Gronkowski, and I was waiting one more week to hold on to him, but now that I'm 1-4, I have to do something drastic. Any other owner in any other fantasy league will look at me like I'm nuts, but now if you're desperate, not only do you go out and try the whole handcuff thing. If you're desperate, I look at trading, even your quote-unquote untouchable players. That's just me, though. I'm 1-4. I got to do something.
Oh, yeah. Well, Alex, we'll be talking after this broadcast is over and figuring out that trade for sure. But, Jordan, I know that you have some good things to say about a guy who we haven't talked about, and you want to talk about trend analysis. What more do you have to say but 30 carries, 150-some-odd yards? Todd Gurley, is he for real or what?
Had he not have been injured and they worked him in at the beginning of the season, he would have been top 5, top 3 running back. Prior to or after the first game, I immediately went and acquired him in a trade. I traded DeAndre Hopkins for him in a standard format. I had him on my roster and two of the other ones, and then in a PPR I tried to package a Forte and a receiver for Gurley and a receiver. Now I think that the game script for St. Louis can interchange quickly. I think that they have a defense that's strong enough to keep them in the game for the most part. But even in blowouts, I see where they are still, continuously trying to use the ground and pound approach. And he's phenomenal. He looks like an absolute stud. And outside of Le'Veon Bell, Peterson, Charles is out. You can throw Forte. Lynch is dealing with a hamstring. Quite frankly, Gurley and Foster are the guys that were drafted later on. Foster, we didn't know when he was going to be coming back. Gurley, rookie running backs tend to not really have that great of rookie seasons. You don't really see somebody come out of the gate and just tear it apart. But knowing how good the Cardinals' run defense is and watching what Gurley did to him, I immediately was on him. I would say that there's not too many running backs that if you can go and acquire him, certainly do it. I am that high on him.
Oh, absolutely, and kudos to you for making that jump early, and that's sometimes the trick. You have to go, if there's somebody you have that gut instinct about, go and make that trade early. You got to buy low, sell high type thing. That's why I'm saying sell Rawls right now, because I don't think he's doing anything anymore with Lynch coming back. People are going to still want him, that sort of thing. Andre Johnson, if you still had him on your roster, try selling him now, because I think that was a fluke 1 week thing. Somebody else might think differently. That's the kind of stuff you need to be looking at right now and trying to make the best out of a situation. Same thing. I mean, I have Jordan Matthews. I can't stand him anymore. Then again, if I didn't have him, I might consider looking at maybe getting a trade for him if I can get him for the right price and getting him for really cheap. So it's all about getting things for the right price and just trying to make the best out of any opportunity that you can get. Greg, are there players out there that you're absolutely 100% avoiding getting rid of, or anybody specifically that you want to really go after right now, whether it be through free agency or a trade?
Well, a couple players that if they're out there, definitely you want to go after. One of which is Moncrief right now. Moncrief is trending in the right direction, even though he had a horrible game last week. Overall, I think people basically knee-jerk reaction and basically dropped him. I think this guy is trending. He's going to be trending in the right direction. He's going to be getting the looks out there. As I said earlier, I said I'm real high on Shane Vereen right now. If he's sitting on your waiver wire, go after him, especially with the number of running backs that are not producing, with the numbers itself that they should be. Those are just two particular players that the Ruben Randalls of the world. Those would be the players that I'm looking at right now. Rather than looking at matchups, I'm looking at the consistency, the number of looks, and how often they're going to be involved in the offense. Percy Harvin is another one that's kind of intriguing me at this particular time as well.
Drop him.
I think
just drop him.
Well, I'm looking at it. I'm not going to play him. But I'm looking at him as maybe somebody to put on the bench and to analyze at this particular time frame. Only because of the fact that there could be something going on here. And as a flex option at the very best, I'm not sure. But I don't know if I want to waste my time on him when I got other better options.
I think you said it right there. There are better options, at least in my mind. Alex, I think, doesn't like that one at all.
I have them in not every week. I have them in plenty of leagues, and at this point in time, it's just nothing. I mean, he was held without a catch on 4 targets week 5 against the Titans. I mean, Sammy Watkins is out too, and it's become clear he cannot carry the Bills' passing game at all, or even really be involved. So, if you're gonna start him, he's like a wide receiver 4 at best if you're even in a league like that. So, the offense that he's in now is so what's the word I'm looking for? Just I don't know if I want to say rusty, or they're just kind of off. I don't really trust anyone on the Bills' offense right now.
It's sort of like the Detroit offense, very inconsistent, just bad.
And not your typical pro offense either that's going to rack up yards.
You would be better off picking up Josh Gordon and putting him on your bench.
I wouldn't quite go that far, but that's about right. Josh Gordon can get you as many points right now as Percy Harvin.
He
Yeah,
won't get you
he's just
negative.
he's
I'll say that much.
Well, that's very true, and we've had many instances where negative points can knock you out. Well, gentlemen, one final question before we wrap things up tonight. Uh, you have Antonio Brown on your roster at the moment, and obviously these couple weeks with Mike Vick gone are not doing you well. Are you thinking of doing anything in terms of first of all, do you even consider benching him for a week or anything like that until Ben comes back? And B, do you look to maybe trade him away, or if you don't have him, do you try to go and maybe make a deal to pick him up for later on down the road? What's your thoughts on Antonio Brown as a whole?
All right, I'm going to weigh in on this one right now. If I had Antonio Brown, I would definitely hold on to him because Ben is coming back, and that is Ben's number one go-to guy. Um, at this particular time frame, maybe utilize him as a flex player if you don't have anything better. Otherwise, I would just kind of put him on the bench for the time being, but I definitely would not deal him unless you're really getting a blockbuster deal, because his value is going to be exponential when Ben comes back.
You know, and
No, I don't know.
Okay, but I'll take that over. I certainly would have to say I agree with the scientist there. It's one of those situations. Absolutely, do not get rid of him. Obviously, Vic is hindering the performance of everybody on the receiving core for the Steelers. Le'Veon Bell, the real winner in that group at this point. But Roethlisberger's going to be back. Antonio Brown's a top 3 receiver in the league. If you can go get him, by all means, go get him and hold him because he's got playmaking ability. And really, with that being said, you gotta have him on your team. You've got to start him because of that breakout potential. I think that he's a serviceable starter with or without Vic, regardless of the numbers that he's put up at this point. I think that it's one of those situations where, similar to DeMarco Murray, these players, these high-profile players, when they do not get what they want, they complain. And then what the coaching staff to keep these star players happy does is they force feed them. This is the first week that DeMarco Murray had 20 carries and he had a breakout performance. Antonio Brown, there has been some speculation of him complaining that he wants more targets, wants Vic to look his way more. It's not Vic's fault. Vic's not that great of a quarterback at this age. He is less mobile, and they're trying to keep him in the pocket. He's not a pocket passer. He needs to force feed Antonio Brown and let Antonio Brown basically do what Antonio Brown does. He creates space, he gets open, and he makes yards after the catch are phenomenal. But these little screens and these dump passes, with the defense playing, safeties in the box, makes it almost impossible for him to do anything. So I think that downfield throw towards the end of the game kind of opened things up a little bit. And I think that, if Vic can get in the rhythm, then Antonio Brown just has that breakout potential that he's still a must start every week.
Yeah, I think it's really tough. I mean, if you have enough options to put ahead of Antonio Brown that you're considering being able to bench him, then you ought to be 5-0 anyway at this point, and can probably afford, to keep him in your lineup anyway because you still have the great chance of him going and having that breakout performance. What do you think, Alex? I thought I heard Alex trying to come back in. We've officially lost the Saint for good. He has gone to his devilish ways. He has. He has. I'm muting Alex because he is now forever done because we can't hear him. He's gone off to the nether regions. So, with that being said, One last final comment from each of you gentlemen. What one thing are you looking for in week 6 in fantasy football world as we sign off here to another great week of fantasy coming up?
And one word, consistency. Let's pull in another victory.
Consistency starts with one win and then another. How about you, Jordan?
I'm saying grab out your credit cards and don't be afraid to use your frequent flyer miles and take some gambles on the waiver wires with the Christine Michaels, Ahmad Bradshaw, and some of the other people that are floating around with high upside.
Consistency plus upside equals fantasy championship, no doubt about it. Thank you, gentlemen, for another great toolkit roundtable discussion here on the 360 Sports Network. Of course, keep checking back in for all of our fantasy updates here on Twitter at 3S Network, especially Sunday mornings. The GOAT and the Saint go absolutely crazy on Facebook and Twitter Sunday morning, getting your fantasy lineups for daily leagues and standard leagues ready to go. Ladies and gentlemen,
I've returned from heaven.
Alex returned just in time to sign us off. Thanks again for my colleagues, the Saint Delaverson, the GOAT Tanner, the mad scientist Bashir. I'm James, the Value Man Dawson. Have yourselves a pleasant evening.